Senator, welcome to the program.
Good evening, Tony. It's good to be on with you again.
Well, thanks for joining us on this maiden voyage of his channel, as this is our first day to provide video across all of our platforms. So we're glad that you're on the first one.
It's good to be a trailblazer with you.
Well, let's talk about trailblazing. You know, you were a part of the Trump administration's successful effort, Mitch McConnell leading that effort to get constitutionalists onto the courts, and it was so successful that the left now sees they have to pack the court to try to dilute the influence of those constitutionalists.
That's exactly what the left is up to. They advocated for this last year during the campaign. They wanted to pack the Supreme Court, and beyond the Supreme Court, they want to pack the lower courts as well. And we see why. On Friday night, fortunately, the Supreme Court overturned the Ninth Circuit for the fifth time in the last year on California's COVID lockdowns, suppressing the right to worship God. The only reason it's five times, Tony, is they haven't had a sixth case go to the Supreme Court yet.
Well, of course, the Ninth Circuit is notorious for being overturned by the Supreme Court. But I have to say, Senator, even though this is something to celebrate, that once again California is slapped down, Governor Newsom slapped down, but only by 5-4.
Yeah, it's very worrisome. You know, if we didn't have Amy Coney Barrett on the court, this almost certainly this restriction on private at-home Bible studies almost certainly would have been upheld. It's disappointing to see Chief Justice John Roberts once again siding with liberals on questions about state power, but I think that's in part because of left-wing attacks on the Supreme Court over the last 10 years. He's allowed himself to be intimidated by those attacks. Joe Biden's order last week to establish this commission on so-called court reform, I think is just another example of those kinds of implied attacks, that if you don't start ruling the way we want, maybe we'll expand the courts so we can get our partisan ends pushed through a supposedly neutral court, or maybe we'll add 150 judges to the lower courts. So we don't just have the Ninth Circuit, but every other court of appeals ruling the way we choose.
You know, Senator Cotton, that's a really good point, because I think there's a lot of blackmail going on Capitol Hill. I mean, you've got the Biden administration threatening to pack the courts. You've got Chuck Schumer threatening to eliminate the legislative filibuster if the Republicans don't give them what they want.
Yeah, there's like a sword of Damocles that the Democrats are trying to put over the heads of conservatives in Washington, in the House, in the Senate, on the Supreme Court, but really ultimately over all of our voters, all the people who send us to Washington to represent their views, their values, their aspirations, and their interests. The Democrats haven't been able to use their reed-thin majority yet to do those things, but it is a constant struggle to protect the interests and the rights of all those people we serve in our homes.
You know, back to the court again, I hate to even think what the country would look like if we didn't have the backstop. I never thought I'd be saying this, having the backstop of the courts. But because the Trump administration was so successful in getting constitutionalists on the courts, that has become a backstop to the radical policies being pushed by this administration and their friends like Governor Newsom and others.
The courts have certainly improved a lot over the last 4 years, Tony. You know, you take the Ninth Circuit, they have been reversed now 5 straight times, but it used to be in the Ninth Circuit, you had no chance of getting a fair shake when they randomly drew 3 judges to hear cases. Today, you've got a pretty decent chance in the Ninth Circuit. About 40% of the judges on the Ninth Circuit are appointed by President Trump or other Republican presidents. And in almost every other circuit, we have a large, sometimes an almost overwhelming majority of conservative constitutional jurists. That doesn't mean that Republicans or conservatives will always win these cases, but it means they won't be destined to failure because the judges are liberal ideologues.
But, you know, I will say this before we move on to another topic I want to talk about with you. It's not just the right that is concerned about this court packing scheme. There are even some on the left that are concerned about this, even some that are currently sitting on the court.
Well, I imagine if you sit on the Supreme Court, you see these things a little bit differently than political partisans. Justice Breyer just a couple weeks ago gave remarks at Harvard where he said that court packing would undermine the legitimacy of the court. And as you said, Tony, the Supreme Court is there to protect our rights under the Constitution, to make sure Congress or legislatures or the executives of our governments do not overreach and infringe upon our rights. They're there to uphold the rule of law. And if the Democrats simply pack the courts, it would undermine the legitimacy of the court. It would undermine the rule of law. That's the same thing that Ruth Bader Ginsburg said before she passed away. She said that 9 justices was the correct number and that we shouldn't be adding justices just to achieve what some partisans view as the so-called correct rulings.
Yeah, I know in this age of instant gratification, we rarely think through decisions that are made. But, just for a moment, if you were to eliminate the legislative filibuster, which would be needed to do this, you then have a country that changes drastically with every election. If Republicans win, they can go and by a simple majority change everything. They could pack the courts even more. I mean, it becomes like our almost like our fiscal policy, our monetary policy, where we have hyperinflation. Nothing means anything anymore.
Yeah, Tony, a hallmark of our Constitution is not just popular government, but it is stable government as well. Right. Unlike so many countries in the world today or throughout history, we have institutions like the Senate with its 6-year terms, and equality between the states getting 2 senators each. The Supreme Court and the lower federal courts with life tenure. The presidency with a 4-year term, which in 1787 was considered very long. We have those things so we don't have the kind of turbulent, tumultuous, wild swings of government policy from one election to the next. You still see that even in democracies in Europe. That is a great blessing to liberty and the rule of law. The American people will always get what they want in the end, but sometimes it may take a couple of elections to demonstrate that. And that is a bulwark for all of our liberties. Sometimes people complain about gridlock in Washington. I would suggest gridlock, or that the founding fathers would have called gridlock the separation of powers and checks and balances. And they would have been horrified at the idea that government should be made fast and efficient.
That's right.
Government should be safe.
Yeah, gridlock, not the HOV lane. Because that will lead to bad results. Senator Tom Cotton, I want to switch to another topic, something you've spoken out before, the plague-laden Southern Poverty Law Center. You had looked at that during the Trump administration, some of the stuff that they had been involved in. We thought they were gone. In fact, the FBI, the Department of Defense got rid of them, but all of a sudden they've been resurrected in this military stand down, this extremism in the ranks that the military just went through. All of a sudden, SPLC is back as a resource.
It's deeply alarming that anyone in the military would use the Southern Poverty Law Center for anything. And I'm going to get to the bottom of it, that this organization that many of its own staffers, liberal staffers, have quit over the years because they view this, using hate for profit, condemning organizations like yours, Tony, as hate groups that resulted in one of your security guards being shot because someone found on their map that the Family Research Council was a so-called hate group, or labeling people like Ben Carson or Ayaan Hirsi Ali as having hate-filled views. Totally insane. And then to be, as we learned just a few years ago, it turns out that their founder and their president had engaged in racist and sexist discrimination practice inside their own supposed, or their organization supposedly dedicated to equality before the law. Look, it's fine if the military wants to continue its efforts to try to counteract an extremism. We had to talk about that when I was in 15 years ago. But use a Southern Poverty Law Center.
Senator Tom Cotton, as always, great to have you on. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you.